Thanks for having me. This has just been a lovely event. So I want to talk to you today about how children learn from what isn't said, as well as what is. So Hagar the Horrible turns to his doofus friend and he says, "Any luck?" And his friend says, "Any luck with what?" Hagar says, "Any luck with fishing?" His friend says, "Why didn't you say so? I'm not a mind reader, you know." To those of you who left, thank you. To the extent that this is funny, it's funny because, of course, his friend is supposed to be a mind reader, at least in this very limited sense. In fact, more generally, language understanding requires thinking about the context in which the language is used and the internal states of the person you're talking to. Here's another example of that. Here's Jeremy, who asks his mom whether he can borrow 10 bucks. His mom says no. He says, "Can I borrow 20 bucks? His mom says, "Jeremy, if I won't lend you $10, I'm certainly not going to lend you 20. Okay. How about 40? So as these examples illustrate, understanding language is all about thinking about other people. And philosophers, linguists, and psychologists studying language understanding have recognized this for years. And they've studied the particular processes underlying decoding what somebody meant based on the literal meaning of what they said. So examples that we look at include ones like this one. Say somebody writes to me with a letter of recommendation, says, "I recommend him for your position. He has great penmanship." What do we infer? Well, he's not too bright. Similarly, if I turn to my wife and I say, "I ate some of the cookies," hopefully what I'm trying to say is I ate some, but not all of the cookies. In fact, I left some for you. And if I've eaten most or even all of the cookies, what I said isn't literally false, but it's certainly somewhat misleading. So we call these pragmatic inferences. Inferences about what somebody meant based on what they said and the context in which they said it. And these kinds of pragmatic inferences require thinking about not just what the person actually said, but the choices that they had in front of them, what they didn't say. So in the case of the letter of recommendation, the recommender could have written the person was hardworking, motivated, that they had a record of achievement, and they failed to say all of those things, presumably because they weren't true. Similarly, in the case of the cookies, I could have said I ate all of them, but the fact that I failed to say that implies that it's not true. Okay, so the question I want to ask today is whether children can do this kind of reasoning. Now, there's some reasons to believe that it might be kind of tough, and since the beginnings of the field of developmental psychology, folks have wondered about children's logical reasoning capabilities. One of the founders of the field of developmental psychology, Jean Piaget, famously argued that preschoolers are what he called pre-operational, that they can't reason logically. And even though many of Piaget's theories are no longer taught and no longer believed to be precisely true, this basic point about the pre-operationality or the failure of logical reasoning in preschoolers still rings true to many of us that hang out with preschoolers on a regular basis. Sometimes they're logical, but more often they're not. So, in particular, you might wonder if preschoolers could do this kind of some cookies logical inference, because this really is quite a complex computation when you think it through, right? You have to reason, well, if you'd meant all, you would have said the word all. But you didn't. You said some. So you must mean some, but not all, the thing you didn't say. This chain of reasoning sounds on the face of it unlikely. This is tough stuff. So that was kind of what was going through my head as I began this research program, as I started here at Stanford and began working with the lovely folks at Bing. But over the past couple of years, my mind has been changed more than a few times. Here's one reason my mind has been changing recently. This is my daughter, Madeline, who is the exact 33 months that we were hearing about earlier. This is one of our recent excursions to the Children's Discovery Museum in San Jose. It's one of my favorite institutions in the Bay Area. So on this particular visit, we wandered upstairs to a place called the Wonder Cabinet, and my daughter, as she does, was setting a trap for other toddlers. She took every single one of the stuffed animals and every single piece of play fruit and set them beautifully on the table, just waiting for another child to come up and mess up her diorama. And I tried to intervene on the situation gently. I tried to guide her behavior in a way that I thought was kind of subtle and might fly under the radar. And I said, "Madeline, you can play with some of the stuffed animals." Madeline turned to me and said, "Dad, why not all?" So this is just one of a number of pieces of evidence, this anecdote and other more substantial pieces of evidence that I've been collecting over the past couple of years that suggests that preschoolers really are able to think logically about what we don't say. They're able to reason about it, especially in contexts like this one, where they have strong expectations about what we should say, and strong feelings about the outcome of what we meant. So let me show you a couple of experiments that my collaborators and I have done at Bing over the past couple of years that I think show that preschoolers can reason about what we don't say, and in fact even can learn from what we don't say, that this forms a powerful source of information about the world around them. The first study we did was very simple. We introduced the children in the game room to a puppet named Furble, and Furble was really quite bad at his life. So Furble kept getting lost, he'd lose his car, he'd lose his house, he didn't know which one was his bed, and he'd constantly have a couple of options, like these options, and he'd say something totally uninformative to try to help the child help him pick out what he was looking for. So in cases like this, he said things like, "My friend has a hat." So which one do you think is Furble's friend? The guy in the middle. So you guys, like others on the internet who we tested on this, and folks around the world, select the guy in the middle, and perhaps you're going through the same kind of reasoning as in the other case. So you're going through that same counterfactual. If you wanted to describe the one on the right, you might have said glasses, but you didn't, so it's the guy in the middle, not the guy with hat and glasses. So this is precisely the question we ask. Can children make this same sort of inference? So we set this up, and Furble set the stage for us, and here's what we saw.
My friend has a hat. Can you show me my friend? Awesome.
So what we found was that over the course of the preschool period, children were getting better and better at making this kind of inference. So what I'm showing here is children ages 2 to 4.5. And the proportion choosing the different options in the study. The first option, of course, was the figure that had neither glasses nor a hat. And, of course, only a 2-year-old would really tell us that that was the right answer. Probably because they were trying to mess with us rather than because they really thought that was the right answer. But now there were 2 other options. One, which was logically true, was the figure with the hat and the glasses. And in that case, we got some children choosing this, especially the earliest children. And remember, the sentence is logically true of that figure. My friend has a hat is true of the face that has a hat and glasses. But as the kids got older, we found that a striking number of them were choosing the one feature referent, the one that was not only logically true, but made sense in light of what the speaker had not said. And so around 3.5, 4, we saw children really diverging here between the 2 feature and the 1 feature reading, and really suggesting that they were able to make this kind of logical inference about what the speaker was choosing in context. So our next study asked whether children not only could make an inference about what the speaker was thinking, but also learn words based on the choices that the speaker made. So we took the same experimental paradigm, but we converted it into a context where the children, we believed, didn't know the words for the objects. So we introduced them to 2 dinosaurs, for example, and we told them about one of the dinosaurs. This is a dinosaur with a dax. We then asked which of the 2 objects they mapped the word dax to. And we probed that by asking them which of these has a dax, 2 dinosaurs that unambiguously either had the feathered headdress or the bandana. I later learned, based on the royal wedding, that feathered headdress is called a fascinator. So even adults can do word learning in these sorts of contexts. Now, of course, this has the same structure as the previous experiment. That is, you might reason, well, why would you tell me about this particular dinosaur to tell me about the word dax? You could have very well pointed to the other dinosaur and said, this is a dinosaur with a dax, if you were trying to teach about the fascinator instead of the bandana. So by thinking about what an informative speaker would have said in that context, they could reason that, hey, the guy with the bandana is the only one to point to if dax means bandana. And that's precisely what we saw the kids doing. So this is for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, their proportion of correct judgments. The blue bars show their performance on the ambiguous trials, and they were better than chance. That means they were getting something out of this experiment. But these are also preschoolers, and they may not be able to learn or remember words all that well across many different trials. So we had a control condition where we simply told kids this is a dinosaur with a dax, and the dinosaur had only a bandana. And in fact, those pink bars shown next to the blue bars are almost identical. So kids were almost as good at learning words from what was unsaid as they were from learning them normally, suggesting that they really were using their expectations about the speaker and what the speaker didn't say to guide their learning in a really quite powerful way. So that suggested to us that children were learning about words based on their expectations about other people. The last study we did asked whether preschoolers could learn about the world from what we don't say. So this is Allie Horowitz, who did her dissertation in my lab and worked at Bing throughout graduate school. And in her dissertation studies, she showed children very simple displays like this one. So she said things like, this is a special kind of tibu, this is a broken tibu. And then she asked children to generalize this new category that she was teaching. She said, what do tibus usually look like? So because she had said this was a broken tibu, she reasoned that the children would infer that other tibus typically didn't have that broken off bottom part, and so would choose the small figure that was unbroken. In contrast, when she said this is a small tibu, they would reason that that broken part was actually characteristic of the shape and would assume that tibus were usually the same but larger. And we found that over the period between 3 years and 5 years, precisely the ages in Bing, children were getting better and better at extracting this information about the world from these incidental choices that speakers were making. The particular way they chose to describe a new category was giving the child important information about the makeup of that category more generally. And we believe this is a really interesting way that children are learning about the world all the time. Children are not just learning about the world from the explicit facts we tell them, but they're gleaning our expectations from the descriptions we give as well. So a great feature of this is that we tell them about the organization of the world by the particular choices we make. We say, that's an art museum. And they say, oh, there must be other kinds of museums as well. Science museums, play museums, children's museums. So this is a great way to learn the conceptual structure of the world. Of course, there's also negative information that gets conveyed this way as well, and that can be problematic. We've all heard people say things like, she's a female surgeon, which implies at least that the speaker believes there's something special or unusual about a surgeon being female, passing on in an implicit way this negative stereotype. Okay, so what I argued to you today is that children are able to reason about what's unsaid as well as what's said. And these kinds of pragmatic inferences are a powerful force for them to learn. Not only for them to make inferences about what somebody's talking about in the moment, but also to use these pragmatic inferences to learn about the meanings of words and even about the world around them. And I think this is a line of research that really lines up very nicely with the underlying philosophy of Bing Nursery School. In particular, the idea of being thoughtful about what we say to children is a critical part of the philosophy of Bing. And I think this research really provides a justification for that thoughtfulness. The choices we make, the ways we speak, the ways we make choices about what to highlight about the world, these have an impact on children's knowledge. Not just in what we say, but how we say it and what we leave unsaid. Thank you very much. Thanks to Bing for having me.